The i7-8700. As far as i-series builds are concerned, I think we're getting close to this being the next super budget solution. Though, not quite. That being said, I did find a pretty good used eBay deal that I'm going to cover. As you can see, it's not a full computer. Like I said, we haven't quite hit peak budget range yet. But I got a motherboard, stick of RAM, CPU fan, and the i7-8700 for about $130. And I got this a few months ago, which at the time it seemed to be an especially good deal, but it might even be better now. I haven't really checked in a while. I saw a few of these i7-8700 with motherboard combos for around $150, so $130 did seem to be like a good deal, but again, a fair amount of time has passed, so that might be more common now. We'll have to add a GPU, power supply, and eventually do something for a case, which I'll likely get creative with in a future video. But first, before we add the other components and test this out, what do I mean by super budget PC? Throughout my never-ending journey of upgrading older Office PCs, I've come across a lot of 6th gen i7 processors. The i7-8700, which isn't a bad budget CPU at all. I've come across a few deals where I would find, for example, an HP Z240 with the i7-6700 for $70 to $100. And that price would be for the complete PC. Case, power supply, RAM, CPU, you get the idea. While those deals were good, it would be sweet to find something a little newer in a similar price range, because those prices seem to have been stagnant for a while now, so I'm expecting the newer CPUs to drop down in price, hopefully soon. But that being said, the i7-7700s don't get me that excited. Mainly because they're still 4-core, 8 threads, just like the 6700s. So, not bad, but not massively better than the previous generation. But while they're not massively better, there's still a pretty steep jump in the price. However, the i7-8700, that's the generation that Intel started building the i7s with 6 cores and 12 threads. This CPU runs at 3.2 GHz base speed and 4.6 GHz turbo boost. A decent budget processor all around. And I've been waiting for the price to come down for a while. But waiting is not my strong suit. I have a problem, okay? I'm sick! So, I encountered an eBay listing where I said, good enough. Good enough. At least for a used hardware fiend such as myself. An ASUS Prime Q370M-C. Anyway, it's the ASUS Prime motherboard with the i7-8700 and 8 GB of RAM. And also a crummy little fan that looks more like it would have shipped with a 3rd gen CPU than an 8th. But I guess that's just kind of what they look like. And that's it. It's not a full computer, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video. So, at the price tag of $130, it's not a terrible deal. And what's a decent deal without a little bit of chair desk? We're gonna need a little chair desk in this general vicinity. We're gonna need some chair desk. But before we throw it together, let me say that if I had to buy the rest of the stuff, like hard drive, power supply, and all that, I might not have gone for this deal. I work with a lot of computers, so I have all that other stuff we're going to need lying around. Except for the case, which, as I mentioned, this is probably going to lead into a creative, non-case case build in a future video. And by creative, I mean I'm going to build something shoddy and terrible looking to function as a case, because that's my style. But for now, now, let's set this up temporarily and just mess around with it to see what it can do. We're going to need a little more space to mess around with, so chair desk was just for display purposes in this video. Hail chair desk. First thing to mention is I'm committed to using this because unless I want to put it in a real case, I refuse, then I'm not really going to be able to sell it. One of these Z440s I upgraded has been serving as my gaming computer, so I'll probably try to sell that and then this will take its place. But we'll have to see how it goes. I'm just setting the motherboard up on some makeshift stands that have bolts and nuts that will kind of hold it up off the table. I'm going to add some RAM. The i7-8700 can run up to DDR4 2660Hz megahertz. Yeah, that was smooth. DDR4 2660Hz. This is going really well. Alright, I'm adding RAM. And the CPU, the i7-8700, can run up to DDR4 2660Hz. Oh my god. DDR4 2666 megahertz RAM. That's the speed it can run. But it only came with an 8GB stick, so I'm going to add more, and I'm going to bring it up to 32GB. Then, I'm hooking up the power supply, adding an M2 SSD, and then we should be ready to do the OS install and all that fun stuff. And just a few things to note about the motherboard is that it has 2 M2 slots for an SSD and 6 SATA connectors, so it could probably be a pretty decent little home server, even though the i7-8700 is probably overkill for something like that. Also, I'm dropping in the GPU. I'm going with the GTX 1080 Ti because that's the best card that I have, though I imagine this system could run a better GPU without any serious bottlenecking. As far as a budget system, this shouldn't be a bad setup at all for 1080p gaming, which is all that I do anyway, and I've been perfectly happy with the experience. So, with everything set up, power supply connectors all hooked up, we have our GPU in, the drive's ready to go, got everything installed, we should be ready to try out some gaming. And I think we're in a pretty solid range of price to performance, and we're going to see some decent results. At least I anticipate, at least. As we fire up the game, a quick note in case anyone is interested in the motherboard itself. It did have a Windows key embedded in the firmware, meaning it did a full version install of Windows 10 without prompting for a key or anything. It just pulled it from the firmware, which is a pleasant surprise because you see that in a lot of Office PCs, but not as often in standalone boards like this. Everything we're doing will be 1080p resolution. The first game is Doom Eternal, a 2020 game running the highest in-game graphical settings. So far it's running really well. The frame rate is a solid 120 frames per second. Any dips are infrequent and only drop a few frames. I haven't seen it go below 110. Based on past systems I've messed with, it comes as no surprise this game is running great. And the video is me filming the screen directly. I'm more interested in gaming performance than how the system games while also running capture software, which can affect performance. Though I'm working on getting an external capture solution set up so I can get better video without affecting the gameplay, but this is what I have for now. Alright, this next game, I don't really know how it's going to pan out. This might be too much for a budget system, but this is Far Cry 6. It's a 2023 game. I've never played a Far Cry game, but this was super cheap during the Steam Summer Sale, and I needed a newer game for testing. And so far playing this, I have to say my concerns may have been unfounded. Again, we're at 1080p with highest in-game graphical settings, and everything is looking solid. The frame rate is pretty consistently hanging at about 90 FPS. Dips are occasional, and it only drops to the high 80s, and spikes are around the high 90s, low hundreds. So it might not have reached super budget status yet, but it's a pretty solid budget gaming system all around. Alright, that should be all for today. I really appreciate everyone who's been tuning in. Thank you for watching, and I will see you later.